Songs have been the not-so-secret weapon behind every fight for freedom, every struggle against injustice and bigotry. Yip Harburg. This is the story of one such song. Not just any song, but one that is sung in the United States in public settings more often than any other song except the Star-Spangled Banner. Think seventh inning stretch. It's Take Me Out to the Ball Game. But there is another side to the story, because Take Me Out to the Ball Game was suffrage's secret song. Let me tell you about Jack Norworth, a successful vaudeville performer in the early 1900s. He didn't become as well known as his wife, Louise Dresser, who went on to star in moving pictures. But in 1907, a reporter interviewed a teary-eyed Louise Dresser. The newspaper headline read, "Louise Dresser declares husband," that's Jack Norworth, "will endeavor to obtain divorce so he may wed Trixie Fraganza." Trixie Fraganza, one of the best-known, most popular performers in vaudeville. Delia O'Callahan took the stage name Trixie Fraganza and became a star performer. Think of the popular female performers of today: Lady Gaga, Madonna, Beyonce, Diana Ross, Judy Garland. That was Trixie Fraganza. And she was a new woman. A woman who spoke her mind and managed her own life. She joined the suffragists and used her notoriety to help organize meetings and give speeches. I do not believe any man, at least no man I know, is better fitted to form a political opinion than I am. Trixie Fraganza was in the public eye off the stage as well as on it. In 1908, she went with a few other hardy pioneer suffragettes to try to see the mayor of New York. But she won from the crowd the only jeers she ever had heard. 1908, 60 years since the first Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, and they're still fighting for the right to vote. 60 years! That same year, 1908, Jack Norworth divorced Louise Dresser and married Nora Bayes. He was her second husband out of 5. If Trixie Fraganza was the Lady Gaga of her day, then Nora Bayes was Taylor Swift, Rihanna, Aretha Franklin, Barbara Streisand, Katy Perry. You get the idea. When she decided to make her career in show business, a stage manager suggested she needed a better stage name. Rachel Goldberg would not do. "Well," she said, "my family calls me Dora." "That's good," the stage manager replied, "but how about something a little more sophisticated sounding, like Nora?" "Okay, Nora. Now about a last name, something short and sweet, like a letter from the alphabet." Like Nora, the stage manager was Jewish, so he proceeded to recite the alphabet in Hebrew. Aleph, Bays, Bays, that's it. So Rachel Goldberg became Nora Bayes. As to whether Nora Bayes was a suffragist or a member of the newly formed Equality League of Self-Supporting Women, I don't know. She did appear in Ladies First, a suffrage comedy, and she was undoubtedly a new woman who spoke her mind and stood up for herself. In a contract dispute with Ziegfeld's Follies, she testified, "Mr. Ziegfeld wanted me to wear tights and to sit perched on the back of an elephant. I told him I had never worn tights and did not purpose doing so while on the elephant's back or anywhere else." And she was not just financially independent, she was at the top, earning $2,500 a week in vaudeville. That's $130,000 a year, a great deal of money in 1920, well over $1.5 million today. Her husband Jack was not nearly so highly paid a performer, but he was, in addition, a songwriter. He wrote the lyrics, with the music, in many cases, composed by his songwriting partner, Albert von Tilzer. Albert came from a music-oriented family. When his older brother Aaron Gombinsky joined the circus, where he played the calliope and piano and wrote some music, he changed his name from Aaron to Harry. For a new last name, he took his mother's maiden name, Tilzer, and for extra sophistication, added Von. Harry von Tilzer became a songwriter and a publisher. Following this pattern, younger brother Elias Gombinsky also entered the music business and became Albert von Tilzer. Albert, like his older brother, was not only a successful songwriter and publisher, he was also a great promoter. Those were the early days of moving pictures in the beginning of the 20th century. The Moving Picture World was a weekly trade paper, this issue from 1908. Note, the publisher, the World Photographic Publishing Company, is located in the center of the moving picture industry, New York. The masthead has an interesting subtitle, All the Film and Song Slide News. Song slides? What are song slides? The magic lantern had been around for more than 100 years, projecting hand-painted glass slides and later photographic slides onto a large screen that could be viewed by many people at the same time. The advent of the electric light bulb, which produced a brighter light than a candle or gas lamp, enabled the slides to be viewed by even more people. Lecturers used the slides to illustrate their talks. The advent of moving pictures presented another opportunity. Early films were presented in vaudeville houses and music halls. They had only one projector, and the movies were only a few minutes long. After showing a movie, the projectionist had to rewind the film, put it away, and then mount the next one, which took some time. To keep the audience entertained, a singer came to the front of the theater and, accompanied by the pianist, sang a song. To further engage the audience, magic lantern slides were projected, depicting scenes from the song. Song slides. Song slide production and distribution was big business. The weekly trade paper, Moving Picture World, happily carried their advertisements. And where were most of these song slide companies located? in the center of the moving picture industry, New York. But with the popularity of song slides came a problem that gave rise to an editorial in the moving picture world. As an adjunct to the moving picture exhibition, illustrated songs are becoming of increased importance. Perhaps the most important criticism is that the slides frequently used do not illustrate the songs. Often they bear no apparent relation to the words or the sentiment of the song. A beautifully colored slide in which the posing of the figures and the general arrangement is beyond criticism, but which bears little relation to the song, will not attract. The two must go together. Thankfully, some song slide makers were known for the quality of their productions. Here is what the Film Index had to say about one of those producers, DeWitt C. Wheeler. What struck me most forcibly in Mr. Wheeler's illustrations is that he invariably follows the lyrics and at the same time gives a variety obtained by few other manufacturers. To these qualities, Mr. Wheeler attributes his success. The Wheeler firm employs 50 girls whose skillful hands apply the colors. And so it was that in 1908, when Jack Norworth and Albert von Tilzer collaborated on a new song, Albert, the composer, publisher, and promoter, hired DeWitt C. Wheeler to create the song slides. And DeWitt C. Wheeler, needing a female actress to play the part of the main character in the song, didn't hire just any New York model. He hired Phoebe Snow. Not that Phoebe Snow, this Phoebe Snow, an advertising personality for the Lackawanna Railroad. In the era of steam locomotives, travelers expected to leave the train dirtier than when they boarded, thanks to the soot that rained down from the coal-fired locomotive. However, on the Lackawanna Railroad, Phoebe Snow dressed in white, flaunting the fact that the Lackawanna burned clean, soot-free anthracite coal. Says Phoebe Snow, about to go upon a trip to Buffalo, my gown stays white from morn till night upon the road of anthracite. Through this advertising campaign, she became very well known and introduced other rail travel innovations too, such as electric lights and individual paper drinking cups. Fancy that. In 1903, she starred in the film A Romance of the Rail. Dressed in white, she sits outside the railroad station. She is approached by a man also dressed in white. Notice his suitcase says Lackawanna Railroad. They will ride the train together and, by the end of the film, be happily married. You can view the entire film, all 4.5 minutes of it, on the Library of Congress website. In 1904, when the Binghamton Press Club invited her to a reception, 5,000 people waited at the station to greet her. In 1906, she was featured in a Good Housekeeping magazine article, Familiar Faces, where Phoebe Snow was identified as Marie Murray. But her best-known role was yet to come. In those 1908 song slides, she would be cast not as Phoebe Snow, but as Katie Casey. Now, I don't know if Marie Murray was a suffragist or if she joined the Equality League of Self-Supporting Women, but I do know that she got the starring role in Jack Norworth's and Albert von Tilser's song about a new woman. Perhaps when he wrote the lyrics, Jack was thinking about or trying to impress Trixie Fraganza. Perhaps he was thinking about or trying to impress Nora Bayes. In any case, whether he did it conscientiously or not, he wrote a song that, without lecturing or demanding, fostered social change. A song about a woman who did not adhere to a woman's traditional role and restrictions, a woman who stated her preferences unreservedly. She didn't simply follow the man's lead. She was not reluctant to speak out against a male authority if he was wrong. She supported her cause vociferously and encouraged others to do so as well. And if that weren't enough, she was interested in sports. Wow. Here's the 1908 song written by Jack Norworth and Albert von Tilser, with song slides produced by DeWitt C. Wheeler, starring Marie Murray. Katie Casey was baseball mad, had the fever and had it bad, just to root for the hometown crew. Every Sioux Katie blew. On a Saturday her young beau called to see if she'd like to go to see a show, but Miss Kate said no. I'll tell you what you can do. Take me out to the ball game, take me out with the crowd, buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I never get back, let me root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame, for it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Katie Casey saw all the games, knew the players by their first names, told the umpire he was wrong all along, good and strong. When the score was just 2-2, Katie Casey knew what to do. Just to cheer on the boys she knew, she made the gang sing this song. Take me out to the ball game, take me out with the crowd, buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I never get back, let me root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame, for it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. The song slides were distributed to movie houses all across the country, and audiences loved them. They loved the song, and when it was over, they wanted to bring the song home for their friends and family. Of course, they couldn't download an MP3 file. It's 1908. They couldn't buy a CD or a vinyl record. They couldn't even listen to the song on the radio which wouldn't be playing music over the airwaves for another couple of decades. Instead, in the lobby of the theater, they bought sheet music. Back home, family and friends gathered round as they played it on the piano and sang along. There's a copy of the sheet music with Jack Norworth's picture on the front cover, and one with Nora Bayes, and another with Trixie Fraganza. When a copy of the sheet music was purchased with the performer's picture on it, the performer received a royalty payment, so it was in the performer's interest to sing the song, and if listeners bought the copy with their picture on it, they got paid. Albert von Tilzer published versions picturing the many popular performers of the day, so they'd all sing the song. 6 million copies were sold. That would be a lot today when we have about 125 million households. But then, there were only about 20 million households. That means in one of every 3 or 4 households, you might find a copy of Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Everyone, it seems, was singing about Katie Casey, the new woman. It was first performed in vaudeville by Nora Bayes in 1908. Albert von Tilzer did not see his first baseball game until 20 years later, 1928. Jack Norworth claimed he never attended a baseball game until 1940. The song wasn't ever heard at a baseball game until it was sung in Los Angeles at a high school baseball game in 1934. The practice of singing the song during the 7th inning stretch didn't begin until 1977. So, for so many years, why was this song so widely sung? You see, this song wasn't really about baseball. It was about the independent, self-directed new woman who thought for herself and made her own choices. It was suffrage's secret song. Songs have been the not-so-secret weapon behind every fight for freedom, every struggle against injustice and bigotry. And if you don't know who Yip Harburg was, you should. He gave us the lyrics to many popular songs, not the least of which is the song of the century, Over the Rainbow. But that's another story. This is Sandy Schuman. There is always another side to the story. I want to start this story at Ira's bar mitzvah. December of 1909, Ira attained the age of 13, and in accordance with Jewish tradition, he became a bar mitzvah, a son of the commandments, and was now permitted to perform roles and rituals in the Jewish tradition, allowed only to adults. And to mark this transition to being a man, he had a bar mitzvah, a ceremony at which he performed one or more of those roles. Now, we don't know which things he did, but we can be sure that he did at least one, and we can be sure that that one thing he did, if nothing else, he sang the blessings before and after the weekly reading of the Torah, the Holy Bible, the scrolls. It's a Saturday morning, Shabbat morning. The whole congregation is in the synagogue, invited guests, friends, family, and Ira sings the blessing. I'm going to do it for you. I'm going to omit the Hebrew and just focus on the melody. Baraham, baraham, baraham. And the congregation responds, Baraham, 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 baraham. And Ira continues, Baraham, 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 baraham. What I want you to understand, what you should appreciate, is that in front of all these people, this 13-year-old boy was well prepared. He had studied, he had rehearsed, he practiced. He knew that melody. He had internalized that melodic motif, and so too did his younger brother George. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. That's basically it. It gets varied and changed here and there, but it's basically that key musical phrase. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. Well, shortly after Ira's bar mitzvah, his mother buys him a piano. Now, a piano for an immigrant family was more than an instrument of music. It was an instrument of social aspiration, because it's 1910, after his bar mitzvah. Commercial radio is a couple of decades off. Recorded music is rare. It's still the cylinders. The way you had music was that somebody played the piano. You went to the music store and you bought sheet music and you placed it on the piano, you sat down on the bench and you played the piano, and people would gather around to listen to you play music and sing along. If you played the piano, you were the center of attention. You had your ticket to society, to social success. And so Ira's mother bought him a piano. Ira didn't want to learn to play the piano. Ira wanted to sit in his room by himself and read books, maybe write something. And then George came home. There's the piano. They hoisted it up through the second-story window, and there it is. And George comes home. He's been out roller skating with the other hooligans on the street. He comes in, takes off the roller skates from around his neck. He sees the piano. He walks over, sits down, plays some of the popular tunes of the day. How did George get to learn to play the piano? Father is astonished. Mother is amazed. Ira is relieved. The piano will be George's. And of course, they grow up to be George and Ira Gershwin, some of the most famous, beloved songwriters of the early 20th century, songs we still love today. And as songwriters, who do you hang out with? Other songwriters, entertainers, people in the business. And there are parties, lots of parties. Somebody's house, somebody's apartment, a club, and always there is a piano. And who's at the piano? George. George at the piano was George at his best. People would gather around They listened to him play. He could play the same song over and over and over again, and each time it would be new. And George would be just as excited to play it again and again as everyone else was delighted to hear it. And as he is glued to the piano bench, mind you, in a room full of piano players, good piano players, it's George who's dominating the keyboard. And where is Ira? Ira, a hard man to get out of an easy chair, is sitting quietly, admiring his brother from a distance, enjoying the way he is a magnet, and how he delights, how George delights in playing this music. And Ira, with that devoted look, you can see him saying, "That's my brother George. He wrote that. Can you believe it? He wrote that. He's at the keyboard, even though all those other piano players want a turn. They know that he's the best. He's the piano player they all aspire to be. He can play their tunes better than they can." Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. Well, it's not enough for George to write Tin Pan Alley hits, Broadway musicals, Hollywood musicals. He wants to write serious music. And he does. He writes the Cuban Overture, Concerto in F, Rhapsody in Blue. But he wants more. He confides in his friend and mentor, Jerome Kern, father of the Broadway musical. He asks him, "Do you think I could write grand opera? After all," he says, "all I have is some talent and plenty of chutzpah." Now, you might say that for the young brother to take over his older brother's piano, to the young man in a room full of piano players to hog the keys, you might say that he had chutzpah. And indeed, George said so himself. And he was right in that Americanized sense of the word chutzpah, where it means bold, brash, brazen, unbridled self-confidence. But in Yiddish, the language from which chutzpah is derived, it has a darker meaning. Demonic, diabolical, devilish, as in the case of the boy who coldly murders his parents and then begs the court for mercy because he's an orphan. That, ladies and gentlemen, is chutzpah. Well, one night George couldn't sleep. And so he picked up a book. Normally, book reading was Ira's department. George was not a book reader, but a friend had given him this book, a good friend, and perhaps he felt obligated to read it, a 1925 novel by DuBose Hayward entitled Porgy. He can't sleep anyway, so he picks up this book, and he is so fascinated by the story, he stays up all night and finishes it. He gets in touch with DuBose Hayward. "Would you be interested in collaborating with me on an opera based on your book?" And DuBose is delighted. This is a great prospect. George Gershwin wants to collaborate with me on an opera. But he says, "George, I'm currently working on a stage play with my wife. But once we finish the play and it's run its course, well then, yeah, let's do it." 10 years go by. And they finally get together. And it's almost like a correspondence course. George is in New York. DuBose is in South Carolina. They have other obligations. DuBose is writing the words first, and then George is setting them to music. Unlike the way most songwriting teams work, including George and Ira Gershwin, George would write the music first, Ira would then write the words. But here, DuBose is writing the words first. The long distance thing cannot complete the task. They rent a cottage in coastal South Carolina, an island off the coast, to spend some time together and work on the opera. And DuBose is a novelist, he's a poet, he doesn't really get songwriting. He can't make it singable. And so they call in Ira to help out. And George wants to get a feel for the music, the local music, the authentic music of the people in this story. And so he attends a local African-American church. And after the church service on Sundays, they would go outside and sing spirituals accompanied by hands and feet, rhythmic clapping, and George is fascinated. He joins in. And then they have the clapping contest, and George enters the contest. Now, you might think that for a white man, a Jewish white man from New York, to participate in the African American church service in South Carolina, you might say that took chutzpah, but not the authentic. Did you hear me say authentic enough here tonight? Not the authentic chutzpah of Yiddish, that Americanized, kinder and gentler chutzpah. Indeed, Ira had to help out with the lyrics. But if you look at the songs, the lyrics of those 35 songs in Porgy and Bess, you'll see they're all the same. They're clearly the words of DuBose Hayward, except for one song. Some of you are nodding, you know what song I'm talking about. And this song came about differently. You see, George wrote the music first, and then he handed the music over to Ira, and Ira wrote the lyrics. If you look carefully, you'll see that DuBose Hayward is credited. George Gershwin's, song by George Gershwin, Ira Gershwin, DuBose Hayward. He needed one more song to his credit so that he could join the American Society of Composers and Publishers. So George and Ira gave him a credit for that song. But understand, these are the words of Ira Gershwin. I'd like to sing the song for you. Look, a guitar. Remember Ira's bar mitzvah? Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. Ba-da-da, ba-da-da, ba-dum. It ain't necessarily so. And the congregation responds, it ain't necessarily so. The things that you're liable to read in the Bible, it ain't necessarily so. Little David was small, but oh my. Little David was small, but oh my. He fought big Goliath, who laid down and dieth. Little David was small, but oh my. Now Jonah, he lived in the whale. Oh, Jonah, he lived in the whale.
he made his home in that fish's abdomen. Oh, Jonah, he lived in the whale. Methuselah lived 900 years. Methuselah lived 900 years. But who calls that living when no gallows given to no man what's 900 years? I'm preaching this sermon to show it ain't necessarily so. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when you take that melodic motif, including the congregational response, and you set those words to it, that, ladies and gentlemen, is chutzpah.
Pretty neat.
So if someone should tell you that George had chutzpah, you can nod your head knowingly, yes, he did. But if someone tells you Ira didn't, you look them square in the face and you tell them it ain't necessarily so.
As a little guy, I had to sit in the car on this long drive out to Huntington, Long Island, because that's where Tony lived. Tony was my father's collaborator. Tony played the piano, he wrote the music, my father wrote the words. Songwriting team. And we finally get there, and it was like paradise because they had this big lawn. There were no fences between their yard and the next yard. They had a dog, there were other kids, as opposed to my little postage stamp of a backyard. And then playing out there, every now and then I would catch a glimpse of the house, and I knew that my father and Tony were in there writing songs. And I'm wondering, how do they write songs? You know, how does that happen? Well, fast forward some years, my next older sister majored in music in college. She's an oboist. But as a music major, she had to learn how to play the piano, because that's what you have to do. We didn't have a piano, so we searched through the Want Ad Digest, I think it was called, or maybe it was a Penny Saver, whatever, the local for sale publication. And my father and I had the job, we had the assignment, and then we go visit these pianos. And you could buy an upright piano for $150. Cheap. $100, even $50. People didn't want them. They're big, they're like chest high, they're thick, you know, I see people nodding their heads. They're really humongous and mahogany, ebony, literally heavy and visually heavy. They like suck the life out of a room. We looked and we looked and we played them, not that either one of us could play the piano, but we heard what they sounded like, and we narrowed it down. One piano. Now it was time to bring my mother along. And my mother took a look at this upright piano, and that's when we started looking for studio upright pianos. The Campbell Soup condensed version. Much lower in height, altogether smaller. We found one that was polished walnut. It was a beautiful piece of work. $300. Piano movers brought it down into our basement, installed it in the family room. My sister got her piano lessons, but now we had a piano in our house. My father didn't have to go out to Huntington, Long Island, to Tony's house. He would come over to our house. And at this time I'm in high school. And Tony is
in the basement with my father, and they're working on songs, and I'm still curious, how do they write songs? And I'm up in that upstairs hallway. You know, when they sell a house, they focus on the rooms, the bedrooms, the living room, the kitchen, you know, even the garage they'll mention. They never talk about the hallways, you know, the most trafficked room in the house. And there's that closet, that one little closet that my mother somehow miraculously put all of the linens and sheets and utensils and books. And she was very well organized. And so there's the doorway that is at the top of the staircase. It's an enclosed stairwell that goes to the basement. And so I'm passing by, and curiosity gets the better part of me, and I put my ear to the door. But it's too muffled, and I can't hear exactly what they're doing. I can't hear how they're writing songs. And I knew this was not quite ethical, you know. So I thought, what the heck, I'll just go down there and I'll sit in and hear what they're doing. So I open the door, I go downstairs, and as soon as I enter the room, they stop working on their songs. Tony spins around on the piano bench. Sandy, how's high school? What's your favorite subject? Which teacher do you hate the most? And I realized they weren't going to write songs while I was there in the room. So I go back upstairs, you know, nice to see her, you know, go back upstairs. And I tried to go about my business, but I really wanted to know how they write songs. I put my hand on that glass doorknob, you know, one of those, look like a rose, glass crystal doorknob. And I was familiar with this door. I knew this door, and so I twisted that doorknob really slowly so it wouldn't make any sound. And I pulled the door open very carefully, wide enough so I could pass through, and I grabbed the inside doorknob with my other hand and held it so that the spring wouldn't pop out and make noise. And I stepped onto the top step of the stairwell and then rotated the knob back into position so the latch came back into place without making a noise. And I stood there on the top step expecting to hear my father call out, hey, who's up there? He didn't say anything, they didn't hear me. So I sat on the top step and I listened. And I hear Tony playing this melody, and my father says, now that sounds just like, and he names some pop tune. Yeah, you know, Sam, I think you got a point there. What if you, and he plays around with it, makes some changes. Yeah, I like that. And they work on that melody for a while. And then, well, let's review that song we worked on the last time. They take out the sheet music. I can hear ruffling around, and Tony starts playing it. And my father comes in singing the words. Not a pleasant experience. But they play it through. And then my father says, you know, it's just not working. And he says, you know, what, the eighth measure, you know, let's do that again. And Tony makes an adjustment, you know, add a dotted eighth note here and reduce the other note there. And my father switches the words around, and they play it through phrase by phrase, measure by measure. And okay, that's enough for now. Let's go work on another song. And they pick up another song. And it's the same sort of thing. Tony's got a comment about my father's lyrics, and should he add a note here so it can be ing instead of Lee, you know, all this sort of details. And I'm amazed, you know, this is really work. And time after time, finally, they finish a song, and they send it into the publisher. And then they get the rejection letter. And they set to work again writing another song. And another rejection letter. And they write another song. They wrote more than 75 songs together. Never had a single one published. Never made a dime. Tony worked for the New York City Police Department. He played the clarinet in the police band. That's how he made it. My father was an electrician,
supervise the maintenance shop in this factory or that office building. But when anybody asks, I tell them my father was a songwriter. Well, I want to sing you one song that Tony and my father wrote. I'll tell you right off, my wife does not like this song. In the category of breakup songs, I would characterize this song as angry, disappointed, and not really wanting to let go. It's that kind of, this is over. But musically and lyrically, I think it's one of their best. I used to worship the ground you walked on. I loved each topic you talked on. Now we're through. The little worm is gonna turn on you. You said that people should be like brothers. The way you criticize others made me blue. The little worm is gonna turn on you. Once we went to a swell affair. You seemed to know everybody there, but I felt so humble, didn't grumble. You didn't even care enough to give me a tumble. I used to cater to every wish, dear. I said that you were my dish, dear. Now that's taboo. The little worm is gonna turn on you. You used to take all the easy pickings, but now you're getting the dickens. Here's your cue. The little worm is gonna turn on you. I just took the initiative to find someone who's appreciative, but I'm gonna haunt you, tease and taunt you. I'd send you to the devil, but I doubt if he'd want you. I've been so weary and so embarrassed, humiliated and harassed. Yes, it's true. The little worm is gonna turn on you. As far as we go, this is the finish. So let your ego diminish. Here's your cue. The little worm ain't gonna squirm. He's getting firm. He's gonna terminate this romance with you. I'll bet you can guess the title of that song. The little worm is going to turn on you. Copyright 1952, Anthony Messina and Samuel Schuman.